The ocean don't care who you are. It'll take a king or a kid without blinking. That day, it almost took him, but something held on. Something I still can't explain. My name's Frank Delaney. I'm 69 years old now. Been retired for, what, almost 14 years. I was a medic with the United States Coast Guard. Spent most of my active years stationed out of Boston. But Gloucester's always been home. Born here, raised here, probably die here. I still live in the same house me and my wife bought back in '84. It's small, gray shingles, wood stove, creaky floorboards that moan louder than I do some mornings. But it's home. Got the ocean just 5 blocks down. That smell, salt and engine oil and wet rope, it's in my blood. Always has been. My dad was a fisherman. So was his dad. You grow up here, that's what you know. Boats, weather, fish, and loss. It's like the sea raises you, then reminds you who's in charge every now and then. I didn't want to fish like my old man. I respected him too much to follow in his shadow. But I still wanted to be out there. I wanted to help the ones who didn't make it back on their own. So I joined the Coast Guard right out of high school. 1974. I was 18 and dumb and didn't know what cold really meant. Thought I'd seen storms. Thought I understood the ocean. I didn't know a damn thing. But I learned. Fast. Being a medic, you see people on the worst days of their lives. Drownings, heart attacks, head injuries, hypothermia, you name it. Sometimes it's a kid, sometimes it's one of your own. You learn to act first and feel later. But the feelings, they pile up. Doesn't matter how tough you think you are. I wasn't the loud one on base. Didn't joke around much. I just did the job. Learned to read people fast. Who could handle pressure, who couldn't. I had a good crew back then. Solid guys. Brave, but not show-offs. The kind you'd want next to you when the sky turns black and the wind's screaming like it wants to rip your skin off. My wife, Sarah, she never liked the job. Not really. Said she could handle the long hours. The calls at 3 in the morning, even the smell of diesel I carried home. But she hated the waiting. Said it felt like being married to a shadow, never knowing if it had come home that night. She stuck with me though, 41 years now. God bless her. Retiring was harder than I thought it'd be. You spend decades on alert, ready to move, to respond. Then one day that uniform goes in a box, and it's just you. No radio, no missions. Just silence. At first it feels good, peaceful even. But then the memories start walking in, uninvited. People ask if I miss it, the job, and I say, parts of it, not all. Not the calls we were too late to answer, not the bodies, not the eyes. But I miss the feeling of purpose, of knowing exactly who I was and why I was needed. That's something you don't replace easy. I've got 2 grown kids now. My daughter's a nurse in New Hampshire. My son teaches high school history. Neither one of them joined the service, and I'm okay with that. They chose different storms. You know, I've seen some damn strange things out there. Things you wouldn't believe. Boats split in half like paper. Waves tall as houses. People alive when they shouldn't be. People gone in seconds. But there's this one rescue. One I keep coming back to, even now. It was cold. Real cold, and quiet in a way that makes you uneasy, like the sea was holding its breath. We got the call about a missing fisherman off the coast of Maine. Small boat, solo crew. No signal, no response, just gone. Happens more than you'd think. But what happened next? The way we found him, how he survived, what he said afterward, that's the one I can't shake. That's the one that makes me wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's something out there we don't fully understand. I'm not a preacher, not some mystic. But that day, out on that freezing water, something happened. Something I never forgot. And that's the story I want to tell you. Most days out there started the same. Early. Before the sun even thought about rising. You'd wake up to that damn pager buzzing on the nightstand, or worse, the radio squawking like it was chewing gravel. Grab your gear, brush your teeth with one hand, lace your boots with the other. Out the door in minutes. Winter months were the worst. January, February, even into March up here. It ain't just cold. It's cruel. Wind slices through your coat, right into your bones. Salt water freezes on the decks before it hits the floor. You step outside and your breath gets stolen before you can finish a cuss word. But we were used to it. You had to be. The Atlantic don't care if you're tired or cold or your kid's got a school play that night. When that call comes in, man overboard, flare sighting, capsized boat, you go. Doesn't matter if it's your birthday or if you haven't eaten since the night before. At the station, you always kept your bag packed. Dry socks, gloves, stethoscope, meds, the whole kit. The guys used to tease me because I always carried extra wool blankets, said I was preparing for the apocalypse. But I'd seen what cold water does to a person. That kind of cold, it don't just kill you. It tries to erase you. Most of the calls, honestly, were minor. A fishing boat lost power. Someone took a bad fall on deck. Engine smoke from a pleasure craft. You go out, stabilize, tow 'em back, maybe patch a gash, or wrap a sprained ankle. Those were the good ones, the easy ones. But every now and then, you'd get one that felt different from the start, like the air around you changed. I can't explain it exactly, but you'd feel this tightness in your chest, like the world got smaller somehow. Some of the older guys called it the warning, said it was the sea whispering in your ear, letting you know something bad was coming. There's this stretch of water off the coast of Maine, about 15 miles northeast of Monhegan Island. Locals call it the Devil's Elbow, not because of any myth or superstition, just because of the shape of the current and the weather that rolls through. I'd been out there more times than I could count. Fog so thick you could barely see the bow. Ice storms that snuck up like a slap. The place eats boats. That winter, we'd already had 3 fatalities in a month, 2 from exposure. One guy tried to swim after his dog. Neither made it. That sticks with you. That helplessness. Knowing you got there 10 minutes too late. You run the math over and over in your head. If we'd launched 5 minutes sooner, if we'd taken the helicopter instead of the cutter, you get in this rhythm out there. Wake, prep, respond, return, debrief, clean gear, eat if you can, crash if you're lucky, do it all again. Some guys cracked under it, drifted into drinking, or just checked out mentally. I saw it more than once, and back then, nobody really talked about trauma. You sucked it up, or you left. Me, I found ways to cope. I wrote down every rescue. Just a few lines. Time, conditions, what we did, who was with me, outcome. It helped me keep track. Gave me something to hold on to when the days blurred together. I still have those notebooks. Boxes of them in the attic. One entry I'll never forget was from a night in late January. Routine call. Small fishing vessel with engine failure. Guy named Morales. Latino, mid-40s, tough as nails. Waves were rough, wind screaming like a banshee. We found him clinging to his boat with one arm, soaked and half-conscious. When we pulled him up, he grabbed my collar and said, "I told my kids I'd come home." That's all. Just that. And then he passed out. You don't forget things like that. You carry 'em. Every voice, every face. The crew back then was tight. My closest guy was Steve Marcus, big guy from Vermont. Used to be a firefighter before joining the Coast Guard. He had this dry sense of humor, but man, when the alarm sounded, he turned into stone. Reliable. Never flinched. We had a couple of younger guys that winter, fresh out of training. Nervous hands, eyes always scanning like they were afraid the sea might reach up and grab them. I remember trying to calm them down between calls. Told them, it's not about being fearless. It's about doing the job even when you're scared shitless. Food was always rushed. Instant coffee, stale crackers, maybe a cold sandwich if the day allowed. Some nights we didn't sleep at all. You'd sit in the dark with the rest of the crew, watching the radar, listening to the wind beat the side of the station like it had a grudge. And every time the call came in, I swear your heart would skip. Even after years, even after you knew what to expect. That tone, that voice coming through the radio, it flipped a switch in you. I remember the sounds. Not the ocean, not the storms. The human sounds. Someone sobbing over the radio, begging for help. Kids crying in the background. A voice cracking mid-sentence because they couldn't finish saying where they were. That was the world we lived in, a world between calm and chaos, between home and open sea. And it's in that space, right in the middle of that cold, brutal rhythm, that the call came in about the man who shouldn't have survived. That one changed everything for me, not because it was the most dangerous, not because it was dramatic, but because of what happened after. But I'll get to that. It was a Wednesday. I remember that clearly because Wednesdays were usually slow, just bad enough to keep you alert, not bad enough to get your heart racing. The kind of day where you restock your gear, maybe run a few drills if no calls came in. But that morning, something felt off. Weather report said a front was shifting in. Cold snap pushing down from the north, mixing with warm air off the coast. That meant fog. I'd seen it before. Thick, sticky, heavy like wet wool thrown over your shoulders. You don't see 10 feet ahead. And on the water, that's a problem. We were just finishing up breakfast. Powdered eggs, instant coffee. The usual when the call came in. It wasn't a scream. No panic. Just this flat voice over the radio. Maine Coast Guard relay station. Female voice. Calm as ever. Unconfirmed report of possible person in water. Single vessel overdue. Last known location 10 miles east of Boothbay Harbor. No distress signal received. No visual. I remember Steve looking up from his coffee. Didn't say a word. Just stood up, like he already knew this was going to be a long one. We suited up fast. Dry suits, gloves, emergency packs, thermal blankets. I checked the defib unit, then triple-checked the hypothermia meds. I had this tightness in my chest. Not panic, just this pressure, like something inside me was bracing. The man's name was Emmett Granger, 48 years old, local fisherman. Been running that same crab boat for over 20 years. He'd left port alone the night before, routine trip, nothing unusual. Except now, it was morning, and no one had heard from him. I'd met Emmett once, years before. He came into the station with a busted hand, crushed it fixing his winch. Tough guy, didn't say much. I remembered his eyes, though. That kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. The kind that builds over a lifetime. We launched the 47-footer within 15 minutes. Visibility was trash. Fog was rolling in so fast it looked like we were sailing into smoke. Waves were about 4 to 6 feet, wind biting hard from the northwest. We kept the radio on scan, just in case someone picked up a signal, but it was dead silent. Those kinds of searches are the worst. You don't have a location, just a guess. You work in grids, section by section, scanning the water with binoculars and sonar. Every shape in the waves looks like a person. Every shadow makes your stomach clench. Steve was at the helm. I was in the back with one of the rookies, Kyle. Kid was green but steady. I could see his jaw clenching under the wind, trying not to show how much the cold was getting to him. About an hour in, we found debris. A white cooler, cracked open, bobbing in the water. Half a life jacket tangled around a trap line, then a boot. Just one, floating upside down. That's when your heart drops. That's when you stop thinking and start feeling. 'Cause now it's real. Now it's not just a drill. I bagged the boot. It was Emmett's size. We didn't say anything. Didn't have to. The waves picked up. Not huge, but mean. Slapping against the hull like fists. The kind of chop that messes with your focus. Steve kept pushing through, reading the sonar, keeping us steady. 2 more hours passed. No sign. No signal. The temperature was dropping. Wind chill brought it down to the low 20s. Ocean temp maybe 38, maybe less. You don't last long in that. 10, 15 minutes tops before your muscles stop responding. An hour and you're gone. That's the reality. The rookie looked at me and asked, quiet, "How long you think he's been out here?" I didn't answer. Around the 4th hour, I started thinking we were going to call it. That's what usually happens. They say you search for a window. When it closes, you don't talk about it. You just go home and write the report. But then we heard it, a crackle on the emergency channel. Not a voice, just static, like someone pressing the mic. Once, twice. Steve cut the throttle. We all froze. Radio squawked again, faint and broken. Help. That was it. Just that. One word. Then nothing. I grabbed the mic, called back. No response. But we had a direction now. Steve turned the bow northeast, throttled up. We all leaned into the wind, eyes wide. That's when I saw him. Off the starboard side, maybe 100 yards out, something broke the surface, just a shape. At first I thought it was more debris, but then it moved. I yelled, pointed, and we swung the boat around. He was floating, not swimming, not waving, just floating. Face up, arms curled to his chest. He looked like a piece of driftwood, pale, barely visible in the fog. We pulled alongside slowly. Kyle threw the hook and missed. Second try, he snagged the collar of Emmett's coat. I reached down, grabbed the back of his vest, and lifted. He didn't move, dead weight. When we got him on board, he wasn't breathing. No pulse, skin like ice, eyes closed, lips blue. But I'd seen this before. Hypothermia plays tricks. Sometimes it slows the body down so much it looks like death. But it's not. Not yet. I started compressions right there on the deck. Steve wrapped blankets around him. Kyle prepped the AED. I remember counting 1, 2, 3, pressing into that chest like I was trying to push him back into life. First shock. Nothing. Second shock. Nothing. Then the third. He gasped, not a breath. Just a twitch. But it was enough. I kept going. Talked to him the whole time. Come on, Emmett, you stubborn bastard. You ain't done yet. His pulse came back, weak, thready. He was alive. Somehow. After hours in that water. We radioed ahead. Medivac was already inbound. When they airlifted him, I held his hand for a second, just long enough to feel the warmth trying to return. I looked down and saw his eyes flicker, not open, just aware, like he knew he wasn't alone anymore. That moment, it shook me, hard. I've seen plenty of death, but that felt like something else. That felt like he came back from somewhere far. When we pulled him up on the deck, I honestly thought he was gone. His body was stiff, not fully frozen but close. His skin was this pale grayish color, like wax. No chest movement, no sound. His clothes were soaked, water dripping off like he'd just crawled out of the grave. I've seen people pulled out colder. I've seen bodies pulled out warm too. Dead's dead usually, but something about him didn't sit right. There was this tightness in my gut. Not fear, not panic, just a refusal to accept it. Like I wasn't ready to let go of him, even though I barely knew him. We got him flat on the deck. Kyle looked at me, eyes wide, waiting for me to say something. I told him to grab the blankets, then turned to Steve. Get the AED. The moment my hands pressed into Emmett's chest, I knew we had a shot. His ribs gave just enough. Not rigid, still soft under the pressure. That meant his body hadn't completely shut down. I started compressions, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Trying to keep rhythm, trying to block out everything else. The wind, the fog, the water slapping the hull. Steve tore open the AED, got the pads on him. Kyle cut away the coat, shaking but focused. Clear! First shock. Emmett's body jerked hard. Then nothing. I went right back to compressions, sweat dripping down my back despite the cold, my breath clouding in front of my face. Time stopped meaning anything. I just kept counting, just kept pushing. Second shock. Same thing. No breath, no movement. I could feel Kyle starting to lose hope. He looked at me like he wanted to ask if we should stop. But I didn't stop. Not yet. Third shock. That's when it happened. His chest twitched, just barely. Then again. His eyelids fluttered like he was dreaming. Then this noise, a tiny wet gasp, like someone sucking air through a straw. I said his name. Emmett. You hear me? You're not done. You stay with me, you son of a bitch. It wasn't anger. It was pleading. A whisper under my breath like a prayer I didn't believe in anymore, but still said anyway. We wrapped him in thermal blankets. Got heat packs under his arms and groin. Steve called in the chopper, gave our coordinates. ETA 20 minutes. That's a long 20 minutes when someone's life is hanging by a thread. I kept my hand on Emmett's chest the whole time, not pressing anymore, just grounding him, trying to keep him here. He wasn't conscious, but he was breathing now. Shallow, uneven, but real. Every few seconds, his lips would twitch. His fingers, too. Like his body was remembering what to do. I looked down at him and saw his face twitch again. Eyes still closed, but something about his expression changed. Not pain, not fear. Just this kind of calm, like his body had stopped fighting and decided to trust us. The wind kept picking up. Fog wasn't letting up either. Felt like the whole world was shrinking around our little boat, like the ocean was trying to close in and take him back. And honestly, for a moment I thought it might. But then I heard the rotors. That sound, distant at first like a mosquito in your ear, then louder, closer, the kind of sound that fills your chest and makes your teeth buzz. The chopper hovered above us, cold spray whipping off the ocean, blinding us for a second. The rescue swimmer came down first, clipped in, helmeted, solid. He gave me a thumbs up. I gave him the vitals I had, helped him secure Emmett. Getting a man on a basket in those conditions isn't easy. Boat was pitching, rotor wash was violent. Took a couple tries, but we got him in. As the basket lifted, I felt this ache in my chest. Not pain, just this weird kind of weight. Like something was being pulled out of me with him. I didn't want to let go. And that was strange, because I'd done this before. Rescues, medivacs, even deaths. You do your part, hand them off, and hope for the best. But with Emmett, I don't know. It felt personal. Maybe it was the way we found him. Just floating there, silent, like he'd been waiting. Maybe it was that look on his face when he gasped, like he'd seen something the rest of us hadn't. After the chopper disappeared, we sat in silence for a while. The engine idling, boat rocking. Nobody spoke. Even Steve didn't light a cigarette, which he usually did after a tough one. Kyle sat down next to me on the deck, arms wrapped around his knees. Finally he said, "I thought he was gone." I nodded. Me too. He looked at me again. "But you didn't stop." I didn't answer, just stared at the water. What I didn't tell him, what I've never told anyone, is that when I was pressing on Emmett's chest, I heard something. Not out loud, not with my ears, but I felt it, like a whisper under my skin. Not words, just a pull, a tug in the opposite direction of death. I've never been a religious man, never talked about spirits or fate or any of that. But in that moment, I felt something pass through me, like I wasn't alone on that deck. Like something bigger was leaning over with us, pushing with my hands, breathing into Emmett's lungs. I kept that to myself, figured people would say I was tired, emotional, making things up. But I know what I felt. After we got back to the station, I went to the locker room, sat on the bench for a long time. Didn't change. Just sat there, gloves still on, staring at the floor. I couldn't stop thinking about how close it had been, how thin that line is. One more wave, one more minute in the water, and he'd be gone. But he wasn't. He was alive. And none of us could explain why. It was 3 days later when I saw him again. They flew Emmett to the medical center in Portland. Severe hypothermia, mild pulmonary edema, some heart arrhythmia from the cold. But he made it. Somehow he made it. I called the hospital that night. Didn't even know why at first. I needed to hear he was still alive. Nurse told me he was stable, still unconscious, but improving. Said the doctors called it a miracle. I just sat there with the phone against my ear, staring at the wall like it owed me something. The next morning, I asked for a few hours off and drove up. It was snowing, real soft. Quiet kind of snow. You know the kind. It muffles everything. Makes the world feel smaller. Safer, almost. But I didn't feel safe. I felt like I was walking towards something I wasn't ready for. When I got to his room, he was sitting up, propped by pillows, oxygen tube in his nose. Skin still pale, but there was color coming back. His hair was wet, probably just had a sponge bath. He looked small, smaller than I remembered, but alive. I knocked gently, then stepped in. He turned his head slow, like every movement cost him something. When our eyes met, something in my chest cracked open. I don't know how else to put it. It wasn't joy. It wasn't sadness. It was release, like holding your breath too long and finally letting it out. He looked at me for a long time. No words. Just looked. His eyes weren't wide with shock or filled with tears. They were steady, quiet, like he'd already gone through all the emotions and come out the other side. "Emmett," I said, nodding once. "It's good to see you sitting up." He didn't speak, just gave the tiniest nod, then looked out the window. I stood there for a moment, not sure if I should sit or leave or say something else. Then he slowly raised his hand, shaky as hell, and patted the chair next to the bed. I sat down. Neither of us spoke for a while. You'd think there'd be a flood of words, gratitude, questions, whatever. But it was just quiet. We both stared at the snow outside. Same rhythm, same silence. Then, after maybe 10 minutes, he said it. "I saw them." His voice was hoarse, dry like paper, but clear. I looked at him, confused. "Saw who?" He turned toward me, eyes steady, like he was testing how much he could say without me walking out. "I was gone, not just passed out. I was somewhere else." I didn't respond, just let him talk. It was dark, but not cold, not warm either, just nothing. And then there were people, shapes at first, then faces, my brother, my dad, my little girl. That hit me like a hammer to the chest. I remembered his file. His daughter had died when she was 7, drowned in a river. That was 20 years ago. He kept talking, his voice cracking but steady. She looked just like she did the last time I saw her. Hair in 2 braids, pink shirt. She didn't say anything, just held my hand. I felt something crawl up my spine. Not fear, just awe. "She didn't pull me though," he said. "She held me, but didn't pull. Then I heard your voice." I blinked. "What?" "I heard your voice," he said again, yelling, swearing, saying I wasn't done. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "She let go," he whispered. And I came back. Then he looked straight into me. Not at me. Into me. "You ever bring someone back like that before?" he asked. I nodded. "Plenty." He shook his head. "Not like that. Not all the way back." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say the wrong thing, but I also didn't want to fill the air with noise. So I just said the truth. I just did what I've always done. Same steps, same process. He smiled, just barely. "No, Frank, you didn't." And I don't know what it was, but in that moment, I believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. No drama, no need to convince, just a man telling the truth. He reached out then, hand trembling, and put it on mine. His fingers were warm now, solid. "I was gone," he said again, "but I wasn't alone, and I wouldn't have come back if someone didn't call me." I swallowed hard. My eyes stung. I blinked fast, trying to stay composed, but he kept his hand there, firm. "Thank you," he said. Not just polite, not surface level. That thank you carried weight, like he knew exactly what it cost me to keep going that day. I didn't answer right away, couldn't. Eventually I just said, "You were lucky." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but so was I. To be found by someone like you." We didn't talk much after that, just sat again in the silence. When I left the hospital, I sat in my truck for a long time, engine off, snow falling on the windshield. I could still feel his hand on mine. It's funny. We go through this job thinking it's all about the procedure, the checklist, the training. But sometimes there's something else, something in between the steps, in the look, the breath, the space between life and death. That moment with Emmett. That was the first time I let myself believe that maybe it wasn't just luck. Maybe there's something we can't see, something that reaches across for us when we're too far gone to reach back. I don't talk about this part, not with the guys, not even with Sarah. But that day changed me. Not because I saved a man, but because for a second, I think he saved me right back. After that day, something changed in me. Not right away, not the next morning, but slowly, like a door had opened somewhere inside me and I didn't even realize I'd been keeping it shut. At first, it was just little things. I started waking up earlier than usual, even on my days off. I'd go outside, stand in the cold air, listen to the wind coming off the harbor. Sarah noticed. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was. And I meant it. Mostly. The truth is, Emmett didn't just survive that day. He stayed alive in my mind, long after. I'd see his face in places it didn't belong. At the market, in line at the post office, even in dreams. Not nightmares, not exactly. Just presence. Like his story wasn't done with me yet. A week after the rescue, I went back to the hospital. He was walking by then, slow but steady. We talked a little. He told me about his boat, how it took on water after a wave knocked his traps loose, how he tried to send a signal but the battery was dead, how the cold took over so fast he couldn't even get his gloves on. He said he remembers going into the water, said the first minute was the worst, like his body was being stabbed all over. Then, nothing, just black. Then the faces, then my voice. I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. After he was discharged, he came by the station with a box of donuts and a stack of papers, insurance stuff, boat recovery paperwork. He looked better. Still tired, still thinner, but alive. Grateful. He shook every hand in the room. When he got to me, he didn't say much, just pulled me into a hug, held on longer than most would, then let go. He came by a few more times that year, not to say anything new, just to check in, drop off coffee, ask how the water was. I think he needed to stay connected to us, maybe to keep that part of himself from floating too far away. I found myself thinking about what I'd said on the deck that day. You ain't done yet. I must have said it a dozen times, loud, desperate, maybe even angry. I don't know if I was talking to him, or to myself, because I was getting tired too, not just physically, tired in a way that seeps into your bones. That kind of tired that comes from carrying other people's worst moments inside you, year after year, face after face. There's this thing that happens in the service. You become a vault. People pour their fear, pain, panic into you, and you hold it. You're trained to. But nobody tells you how heavy that gets over time. I'd always kept a lid on it. Never wanted to seem soft. Never wanted to be the guy who couldn't hack it. But after Emmett, the lid didn't fit so tight anymore. Some nights I'd sit on the edge of the bed, hands shaking, and not know why. Other nights I'd find myself walking down to the dock, just to look at the water, to remind myself it was still there, still moving, still capable of both giving and taking. A few months later, I got a letter from Emmett, handwritten. Said he didn't want to call because he wasn't sure he could say it without choking up. He told me he'd sold the boat, said he wasn't going back out. Not because he was afraid, but because he felt like he'd been given something he couldn't waste. He was spending more time with his son, taking care of his sister who was sick. Said he'd started fixing up his dad's old house, turning the shed into a workshop. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "You didn't just save my life, you gave it back to me." I read that sentence about 20 times, then folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket, carried it around for weeks. Still have it in a drawer. Thing is, I didn't feel like I gave anything. I just did what I was trained to do. I showed up, I pressed hard, I waited for the chopper. That's what we do. But maybe sometimes that's more than enough. After I retired, I tried to let it all go. Put the uniform away, cleared out my locker, shook hands, walked out the door like it was just another Tuesday. But Emmett stuck with me. Not in a haunting way. Not like a ghost. more like a shadow that reminds you the light's still shining. A quiet voice saying, "Remember what you saw." And I do. I remember the silence when we pulled him on board, the way his chest didn't move, the weight of him, the color of his skin, the first gasp, the faint twitch in his fingers, the way he looked at me in that hospital bed like we shared something nobody else could ever understand. I've seen a lot of things in my time. Fires, storms, wrecks, broken bones, broken people. I've zipped up body bags and watched parents scream when we told them we couldn't find their son. But that day with Emmett, it sits apart from all of it. Not because it was the most dramatic, but because it was the most human. It reminded me, just when I was starting to forget, that what we do matters, that we don't just respond to calls, we carry people through their darkest hours, sometimes literally, sometimes with just our voice, and sometimes someone carries us too, even if they don't know it. You'd think after all these years the details would start to fade, that maybe the edges would get soft, or the sounds would blur, or the memory would stop sneaking up on you when you're not ready for it. But it doesn't. At least not for me. I still see him. Sometimes I'm driving along the shore, windows down, salt in the air, and it just hits me. The image of him floating there, still, quiet. His arms pulled tight across his chest like he was hugging something no one else could see. Or I hear that gasping breath, the one that came after the third shock, the one that shouldn't have come. It doesn't sound like a scream. It doesn't sound like pain. It sounds like something being torn back into this world, something reluctant but willing. And it's stuck in my head like a loop. I'll be sitting in the backyard, listening to the gulls, drinking my coffee, and then, there it is. Clear as the day it happened. That breath, that twitch, that look. I don't talk to anyone about it. Not Sarah. Not the guys I still keep in touch with. Some things, they're just yours. I think about that more and more as I get older. How many stories we carry that no one else hears. Not because we're hiding them, but because they live in a place inside us that doesn't speak the same language as the rest of the world. People always ask me what it was like, serving in the Coast Guard. They want action stories, drama. You ever save anyone from a shark? You ever jump out of a helicopter? And I get it, I do. That's what they think it's about. But that's not the stuff that stays with you. What stays are the quiet moments, the ones that didn't make the papers, the ones no one saw but you, like holding a man's hand while he slips away, or pulling someone from the water and realizing they're not ready to be gone, or seeing your own reflection in the eyes of someone you just brought back. That day with Emmett, it changed something in me I didn't even know could be changed. And it wasn't just about death or survival. It wasn't just about doing my job. It was about how close we are to the line every single day. You spend enough time out there and you learn real quick. Life doesn't wait. It doesn't check your schedule. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just happens. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you're there when someone needs to be pulled back. But no one tells you what to do with that moment after. No one tells you what to do with the memory. They train you for the process, for the equipment, for the protocols, but they don't train you for what it feels like to carry someone's second chance in your chest for the rest of your life. Emmett didn't just come back that day. He brought something with him, something I don't have words for, something that looked at me, through him, and said, "You're not done either." I didn't know I needed to hear that until I did. Because the truth is, I was tired. I was worn out. I was doing the job, but I wasn't in it anymore. I was thinking about retirement, about being done, and then this man, who had every reason to be gone, he came back, and I felt something shift. I started noticing things again, the smell of the sea, the sound of rope hitting dock, the way the wind moves different across your face when a storm's coming in. Things I used to love, things I had tuned out. It was like waking up. And not just in my work. At home, too. I talked more. Sat with Sarah without the TV on. Called my kids just to hear their voices. Held my grandson a little longer when he ran up for a hug. That day reminded me that being alive isn't the same as living. There's a difference, and it's easy to forget that when you spend your life surrounded by emergencies. You get numb, detached. You have to, in some ways. But the cost of that detachment? It's that you start to miss the little things, the good things, the warm things. Emmett's face when he opened his eyes. That breath. That moment he whispered. I saw them. It cracked something open in me. Let the light back in. I think about that every day. Not with guilt. Not with pain. With reverence. That might sound strange coming from someone like me. I was never one for soft words or big ideas, but when you've spent your life dragging people out of the water, you learn real quick what matters. It's not the medals, not the write-ups or the thank you notes. It's the breath. It's the moment. It's the silence afterward, when you know something bigger than you just passed through. And that stays with you. It becomes part of you. Every time I see a boat heading out past the jetty, I think of Emmett. I wonder if the captain knows how fast it can all change, how close they might be to the edge without even realizing it. And I hope, if they ever find themselves in the water, someone like I was that day is nearby. Someone who won't give up. Someone who's willing to press and press and press until something stirs. I still carry his letter. Keep it in a drawer with a few other things. My badge, my first service pin, a photo of the crew from '92. Sometimes I take it out and just hold it, not to read it again. I've memorized every word, just to remember, to feel that it was real, that it mattered, because it did. It still does. If you've made it this far, listening to all this, thank you. I know it's a lot. I know most people don't think about the Coast Guard unless they see something on the news, or maybe when they pass a cutter docked in the harbor. And that's fine. We didn't do the job for attention. But if there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this. You never know how close someone is to the edge, not just out on the water, in life. You look at someone on the street, in the grocery store, standing in line at the bank, and you think they've got it all together. But maybe they're barely holding on. Maybe they're 1 minute away from sinking. And maybe all they need is someone to show up, someone to notice, someone to care enough to reach out. I didn't know Emmett. Not really. He was just another name on a dispatch, another cold case waiting to become another statistic. But when I saw him in that water, something told me he wasn't ready to be gone, and I listened to that. I held on a little longer than usual, pressed a little harder, spoke a little louder, and he came back. I'm not saying that makes me a hero. I've never liked that word. I did my job, that's all. But I think what matters is how we show up when it counts. Even if no one's watching. Even if no one will ever know what it cost you. Because the truth is, most people won't see your hardest days. They won't know what it took to keep going. They won't see the late nights, the fear, the doubt. But you will. You'll carry it. Quietly. Day after day. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll have a moment like I did. A moment that reminds you it all meant something. That you were part of someone else's turning point. That your effort, your voice, your presence changed the outcome. That's not small. That's everything. So if you're someone who's served, military, first responder, nurse, firefighter, I hope you remember that. You may have saved someone and never even knew it. A look, a word, a decision not to give up. And if you're someone watching this who's never worn a uniform, that doesn't mean it's not your place. You can still make a difference. You don't need a badge or a title to save someone. You just need to care, really care. Listen to the people around you. Pay attention when they're quiet. Reach out when it's easier to look away. Because sometimes the rescue doesn't happen on a boat or with a defibrillator. Sometimes it happens in a phone call, or a chair pulled up beside a hospital bed, or a letter that says, I'm still here. Life's fragile. It slips through fingers faster than we think. But it also holds on, sometimes in the smallest ways. I saw that out there on that freezing morning when a man who should have been dead opened his eyes. And I see it now, in the faces of my grandkids, in the sound of my wife's voice, in the way the tide keeps coming in and going out, steady as ever. So if you've got something to say to someone, say it. If you've got something to hold on to, hold it tight. And if you've been through something like this, if you've pulled someone back, or been pulled back yourself, don't keep it locked up. Tell it. There's someone out there who needs to hear it. That's all I've got. Thanks for listening. And if you've got your own story, share it. Maybe it'll help someone breathe again, just like Emmett did, just like I did.